Hello everyone and welcome back to the Netherworld Bibliothèque. My name is Vervain and today I am once again in the Witchcraft section to tell you about our latest acquisition, Witchy Magic. This book is by Lucy Cavendish and Serene Conneeley, and we have a first edition which was published in 2012 by Blessed Bee Publishing. This book is a really good reference source. So if you are thinking of getting into witchcraft and you want to know, okay, but what actually is witchcraft? What does it look like? What do witches believe? What do they practice? I would say this is a comprehensive manual that will answer all of your questions. And equally, if you're just curious about witchcraft, so let's say you have a family member, maybe like a teenager is getting into witchcraft and you're like, oh, what's this? Should I be concerned? Again, I think this book will answer all of your questions. It explains what witchcraft is. It has interviews with various different witches saying directly what it is they believe and what they practice, what tools they use or don't use, so on and so forth. So by the end of this book, you will have a comprehensive understanding of what a witch is and is not. We begin with the question, what is a witch? And to answer this, the authors do two things. Firstly, they include a dictionary definition. And then secondly, they ask this question to about 15 different practicing witches. And in their own words, they say, this is what I believe, this is what I practice. So for example, let me read you a couple of answers. Tiffany, who is an aura reader, says, to me, a witch is a wise person who works closely with the natural world for a positive effect. I'm an eclectic pagan witch, as I draw from many spiritual ideas and forms, follow the seasonal wheel of the year, and try to observe and respect nature as a deity in itself. It is all of these things that I believe make me a witch. Now, Gemma, who is a teacher, says, to me, a witch is a boundary walker. They walk between the worlds in ecstatic communion with nature and the universe, drawing together the threads of the web that binds us together to the all with a capital A. I define myself as a witch, although I also tend to use the word pagan as it more accurately describes my very green, quote-unquote, leaning. I am a witch because I am an altar for the divine. I tread the line between worlds. Next, we move on to magical myth-busting. So we have some common assumptions, things like, do witches sacrifice animals? Do witches worship Satan? Are witches only female? And the authors go through and explain and break these things down. So for instance, do witches worship Satan? No. Satan comes from the Abrahamic religions, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They have the concept of Satan. Witches do not believe in the Abrahamic God. So if you don't believe in God, therefore you don't believe in Jesus, you don't believe in Satan, you don't believe in Muhammad. So no, witches do not believe in Satan to begin with, never mind worship him. The next one is, who can be a witch? Is it females only? No, so a witch is anyone who has this respect for nature and has practices and beliefs in line with this. So the word witch, it comes from a male practitioner back in the day being called a Wicca, and a female practitioner being called a Wiccaire. And from this we get the word witch. Witch is universal. You can be anyone and be a witch. Now, warlock means traitor or oathbreaker. And it comes from back in the days of the Inquisition, where if you gave up the names of your coven members, you would then be a deceiver or a traitor. So no, a male witch is not a warlock. That's the equivalent of calling someone a traitor or a deceiver. So no, a witch is a witch no matter what their sex is. Next, the book includes about 12 interviews with different witches and asks them each, what do you believe, what do you practice? So we have interviews with an atheist witch, a shaman, a druid, a pantheist, so on and so forth. I'm just going to read you two excerpts from two separate interviews just to give you an idea of all the different ways that you can be a witch. First, I'll read you an excerpt from an interview with Naza Kogo. Nazakogo is a priestess of Hecate. She used to call herself a witch or a pagan, but as her beliefs have evolved, her practice now exclusively revolves around worshipping Hecate and Isis, so she prefers the word mystic. Nazakogo says of her practice, Hecate is the goddess of initiation, magic, and mystery. She is the giver of visions and dreams. She is goddess of the night, favoring solitude and to walk in the darkness. The path of Hecate is based on ancient Greek Hellenic traditions and the ancient cult of the goddess Hecate. It is a distinctive magical path, although it does have some similarities with paths like witchcraft, druidry, and shamanism, such as the respect, recognition, and revering of deities and spirits, the practice of magic and workings of divination, and the honoring of nature as its changing seasons and moon cycles. Working with Hecate includes the practice of ritual, magic, herb lore, divination, and healing, as well as what I believe is the most important role, serving humanity by teaching, guiding, healing, and doing whatever you can to help others. Another one of the interviewees is Frances Billinghurst. Frances practices traditional Wicca, which is a type of witchcraft in which you must be initiated into a coven, and this coven must be able to trace its teachings back to either Gerald Gardner or Alex Sanders. So I'll just read you a little bit about what Frances Billinghurst has to say about her beliefs. Wicca is a religion. Its belief system centers around deity. The main difference between Christianity and Wicca is that our deity is perceived as both masculine and feminine. With the increasing amount of information available, what has been exposed to the public of the traditional Wiccan mysteries has resulted in this work being seriously watered down and misrepresented, largely because of the onion nature of craft mysteries, in that there are numerous layers which are exposed gradually over time as the initiate steps further through the mysteries. The Wiccan Rede is a good example of this, in that it has been interpreted as harm no one or even nothing, which is impossible to do and which is not what it actually means. Deity within traditional Wicca is very much real as the Christian belief in their own God. Therefore, in particular within my own coven, there is no room for atheists or non-believers. If one does not believe in the gods as a divine force beyond their own selves and thus endeavor to establish a relationship with them, then it is best that they look elsewhere. So from these two excerpts, we're already starting to see two things. Firstly, that link to nature being at the core of the beliefs, but what is actually practiced can be very different. So whether you practice publicly or privately, whether you practice individually, whether you're a solitary witch or part of a coven, whether you have really elaborate rituals or not, all of those things can be witchcraft. There is not one correct way, as opposed to an organized religion where you have a manual, so to speak, such as, the Bible or the Torah, the Quran, and where you would have someone like a priest who says, this is the way that you should worship. In witchcraft, there isn't one objectively right way that everyone practices. And again, remembering that in English, witchcraft is a broad term that can encompass many different beliefs as demonstrated in these interviews. Following the interviews, the book moves on to the history of witchcraft. This is quite condensed because it covers over 7,000 years of human history, but it briefly touches on natural forces, celestial bodies, how these were perceived and understood over time, and how they changed from being forces of nature to personifications of nature, so the god of the sun or the god of the ocean, for example. It also then moves on to herbal remedies and wise people in their town or in their village having knowledge of local plants and their properties, moves us through the Dark Ages, the witch trials, and into present day. I think this section of the book would be especially useful to anyone who has a fear or negative stereotypes about witches and witchcraft. It very cohesively and coherently explains witches essentially understand and work with natural forces, such as the changing of the seasons, such as the cycles of the moon. It's not inherently evil or malicious. The next section of the book looks at witches as environmentalists, healers, or intuitives, and how all these three things overlap and work in harmony to create a witch. Following that, we have the how-to section. So if you would like to practice witchcraft, it talks about how you can cast a circle, create an altar, craft your tools. So I should say that you don't have to do every single one of these things. Again, there's not one objectively correct way to be a witch. And as is demonstrated in the interviews, different people believe different things and therefore practice different things. But it is quite common for witches to do things like casting a circle, having an altar. Should you want to try it out, there are some explanations on how you can do that. It also goes through some color correspondences, time correspondences. So again, not everyone believes in this, but there is some belief that this day or this time of day is best for this kind of spell versus that kind of spell. You can try it out, see if it works for you. Next, we move on to the Wheel of the Year. So these are 8 seasonal celebrations, predominantly from the Northern Hemisphere. And I really like that in this book, they acknowledge that in the Southern Hemisphere, the seasons are the other way around. So Yule or Christmas in the Northern Hemisphere is in wintertime when it's cold, but in the Southern Hemisphere, December is the middle of summer. So it doesn't really make sense to say, oh, it's Yule, it's cold, it's a time to, stay inside and be introspective, when it's the middle of summer. So I really appreciate that this book acknowledges that the seasons are different in the 2 hemispheres and therefore talks about how you can flip the Wheel of the Year around. Again, I have to stress not everyone celebrates the Wheel of the Year, and that is fine. You do not have to celebrate it to be a witch. But if you do, this book has some information about it. And then it also includes some seasonal recipes. And I think this is really great because it shows that witchcraft is not something abstract or apart from everyday life. It is part of your life, and in the same way that you would use certain ingredients for a spell or maybe to make an incense, a lot of those ingredients are edible. So something like cinnamon, of course, you could use it in a spell, or you could use it when you make a recipe and put your intention in that recipe. So instead of doing a love potion, for instance, you bake something that is supposed to bring love into your life and you consume it instead of lighting a certain candle or using a certain oil. As you consume this food that you have put your intention into and put these like magical ingredients into, that is a way to use magic in your life in a more sort of everyday, more mundane way. So I thought it was really nice that they included that. But also there's just some great recipes, even if you're not looking at it from a magical angle. There are just some nice recipes in there. And lastly, the book finishes off with a list of media witches or pop culture witches. Not media witches, I'm not calling people in the media witches, but things like Sabrina the Teenage Witch or the Charmed Sisters. It just has a list of like some pop culture figures and just like a little bit of who they are and what the authors sort of liked about them, their depictions of witchcraft, because there really are two witches. There's the pop culture idea where they're hags that fly on brooms and they have all these supernatural powers, they can levitate, so on and so forth. And then there is the actual practice of being a witch, which is more just being respectful of nature, seeing yourself as part of the natural world, not a part of it or apart from it. And so concludes today's book review. I really like this text. I would highly recommend it as a beginner's book, introductory to witchcraft, that kind of thing. I think it is really comprehensive, and I think that it's accurate. I like that it really included all these different interviews, their primary sources of people who actually identify as witches, speaking for themselves and saying what it is that they believe and they practice, and showing that there are some similarities but also some differences. I like that it goes through beliefs and practices, and that it takes into account regional differences. So yeah, I would highly recommend it as a beginner's text. That's it for me. Let me know if you agree or disagree, but otherwise, thank you for stopping by, and maybe I will see you next time.